Pan sample number 3 on our textural class by feel examples today is a soil which, upon initial examination, appears much darker than the previous soil that we worked with. This could be an indication of higher organic matter content. We've air-dried all of these samples, so it's not a difference in moisture content or a difference in the degree of oxidation of the minerals in the solid portion of the soil. As we examine this soil initially in a dry, air-dry state, we'll notice that there are quite a few clods or aggregates in here. If I take one of these clods or aggregates and exert it to force with my fingers, you notice the last one I had to take both hands and put quite a bit of force on to get it to break. In this particular pan sample, I can crumble these with one hand. So that tells me that this sample likely has a lower clay content than the previous sample number 2. Now this soil has aggregated enough to where I really don't have enough soil in here to work with without going in and breaking up some of those aggregates to determine the textural class by feel or the ribboning ability of this soil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of these aggregates or clods. In this particular situation, I'm going to place them into a mortar and pestle. Now you don't have to have a mortar and pestle, but if you run into this type of a situation when determining texture by feel, you have to have some method of breaking down these clods or aggregates. We're not trying to change the textural class of the soil or grinding it per se, but rather we're just taking this and using this to crush the clods or aggregates to where I can then wet the soil and ribbon it. You could probably use a pan and the tip of a ball peen hammer or something like that to do something very similar to this if you needed to crush up the aggregates. Once these aggregates, you get them down into a size range of about half the size of your little fingernail or less, they will take up moisture and allow you to form the ball and ribbon the soil. So this is what my sample would look like when I've got the aggregates or clods broken down to the point to where I can now form the ball. Use my water bottle to bring it up to the appropriate moisture content. Notice how the soil got even darker as we added water to it. That's from what I mentioned previously, that if you have soils and you're trying to determine color on them, it's important to do that at the equivalent moisture content, which the only thing we really have control over here is if we've got it air-dried. So that's when we start with the samples being in an air-dried condition. Got some small aggregates in there I'm trying to get broken up yet, so they'll take up moisture. This one may be just a little bit too high a moisture content, so I can add a little bit of dry soil to it. Okay, so now I've got it formed into a ball. I do the initial squeeze test on the ball to determine whether or not it will hold together, and I see that it does very well here, so that tells me that I'm not in the coarse or sandy textured soils. So my next procedure in this exercise is to do the ribboning. As I go through and begin to ribbon this soil, See that it holds together quite well. This tells me that I do have an appreciable clay content in the soil. See that I formed a ribbon here of approximately it starts to separate after about 1 to 1.5 inches. So I'm in this range. If I go back to my flow diagram, I do get a ribbon. It's about right in that 1 to 1.5 inch range.